The women's 400 meters hurdles at the FBK Games offered a precise snapshot of the current competitive structure in the event, where execution, rhythm control, and race distribution matter more than raw speed alone, and once again it was Femke Bol who demonstrated how far ahead she remains in combining all these elements into one coherent performance. From the very first strides, Bol's approach differed from the rest of the field, not in visible aggression, but in structural clarity of her race model, where the opening 150 meters are not about establishing dominance through pace alone, but about locking into a sustainable stride pattern that allows her to control each barrier without adjustment. And this is where the race was effectively decided long before the final straight. Her first hurdle clearance came without any visible tension, hips staying high, lead leg snapping down efficiently, trail leg tight and fast, and most importantly, no disruption to cadence, which is the defining characteristic of elite 400 meters hurdling, because every inefficiency compounds over 10 barriers and translates directly into lost velocity later in the race. Between hurdles 2 and 5, Bol maintained a near-identical stride distribution, showing no signs of forced adaptation, which is often where even elite athletes begin to compromise, either shortening stride length or increasing frequency to compensate for fatigue. But Bol's ability to preserve spatial awareness and rhythm meant she was effectively running her own controlled time trial, while the rest of the field was already entering corrective phases. By hurdle 6, the separation became measurable rather than just visual, not because Bol had accelerated sharply, but because her competitors began to experience micro-disruptions in their stride patterns, slight stutters before takeoff, marginally lower hip positions, and longer ground contact times, all of which are small in isolation, but decisive over the full race distance. The curve phase from hurdles 6 to 8 is typically where races are won or lost, and Bol's efficiency here is what elevates her beyond the field, as she maintains posture stability through the bend, avoids lateral drift, and keeps her stride symmetrical. Despite the centrifugal forces that often destabilize less technically refined athletes. Coming off hurdle 8, her transition into the final straight was seamless, with no visible deceleration or mechanical breakdown. And this is critical because many athletes lose between 2 and 3/10 in this exact phase due to fatigue-induced inefficiency, whereas Bol effectively preserved her velocity and then added a controlled acceleration into the final 2 hurdles. Her clearance over hurdle 9 and 10 remained technically consistent, which is rare at this stage of the race, and her final sprint to the line in 52.51 seconds was not just fast, but structurally clean. Confirming that this was not a performance built on peak effort, but on sustainable mechanics and race intelligence, making it particularly significant as an early season indicator. Behind her, Gianna Woodruff delivered a performance that highlighted a different but equally effective race philosophy, one based on controlled distribution and late race resilience. Rather than attempting to match Bol's early rhythm, Woodruff's first half was deliberately conservative, allowing her to avoid the accumulation of early lactate that often compromises hurdle efficiency in the final 100 meters. And while this meant she conceded ground in the opening phases, it positioned her well for a strong finish. Her technique over the middle hurdles was compact and efficient, with minimal vertical oscillation, which helped conserve energy, and more importantly, she avoided the kind of stride breakdown that affected others in the field. In the final straight, Woodruff's ability to maintain form rather than increase speed became the decisive factor, as she limited deceleration more effectively than her competitors, securing second place in 54.54, a seasonal best that reflects both physical readiness and improved race management. Emma Zaplatilova, finishing third in 54.71, showed clear technical progression compared to earlier performances in the season, particularly in her hurdle approach, where she demonstrated better distance judgment and more stable takeoff mechanics. Her race was characterized by consistency rather than standout phases, maintaining a balanced distribution of effort across all 10 hurdles, and while she lacked the closing speed to challenge Woodruff, her ability to avoid significant technical errors suggests a solid foundation for further improvement. As the season develops, further down the results, Elna Kellety produced a 54.91 that reflects steady progression, particularly in maintaining composure through the latter stages of the race, where many athletes experience pronounced technical degradation. Meanwhile, Cassandra Tate and Lena Nielsen completed the top 6, with performances that, while not exceptional in time, demonstrated competitive stability in a field where even minor inefficiencies are heavily punished. What this race ultimately reinforces is the current hierarchy within the women's 400-meter hurdles, where the gap between the leading athlete and the chasing group is not defined purely by physical capability, but by the integration of technique, rhythm, and decision-making. Under fatigue, Bol's advantage lies in her ability to minimize variability. Every stride, every hurdle clearance, every transition phase executed with near-identical precision, reducing the cumulative cost of inefficiency to almost zero, which is why her performances appear controlled even at world-class speeds. For the chasing pack, the challenge is not simply to run faster, but to close the gap in execution quality, because at this level, improvements of tenths of a second are rarely achieved through increased effort alone, but through refined mechanics and optimized race strategies. The FBK Games result therefore serves as both confirmation and warning. Confirmation that Bol remains the benchmark of the event, and warning that the margin for error at the elite level continues to shrink, where even slight deviations in rhythm or technique can determine the difference between podium contention and midfield finish. As the season progresses toward major championships, this race provides a clear reference point, not just in terms of times, but in terms of how the event is evolving, increasingly defined by precision over power, control over chaos, and the ability to execute a perfectly structured race under maximal physiological stress. Another critical layer to this race is how it reflects the broader evolution of the women's 400-meter hurdles as an event increasingly defined by biomechanical efficiency rather than traditional sprint endurance alone. Athletes are no longer simply preparing to survive the final 100 meters. They are building race models designed to delay fatigue-induced technical breakdown for as long as possible. In this context, Femke Bol represents the most advanced version of this progression, where her stride pattern is not only stable, but adaptable under pressure, allowing her to maintain velocity without visible strain. For her rivals, the takeaway is clear. Closing the gap requires not just better conditioning, but a deeper refinement of hurdle mechanics, especially in the transition phases, where races are subtly decided.